Let's bring in our guest on this, Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. He is the co-author of that letter to U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer calling for more oversight of U.S.-listed Chinese companies. And Senator, it's good to see you. Thank you for your time
Good to be
today.
with you. Thanks, Becky and Joe.
Kayla just explained what this is, but why don't you give us the backdrop? Tell us why you think this is important.
Well, Senator Kennedy and I think this is important to protect the integrity of U.S. exchanges and to protect U.S. investors. All we're asking is that every country, including China, play by the same rules with respect to U.S. standards, our accounting standards, and our disclosure requirements. Every other country in the world has come into compliance or is about to come into compliance, and our legislation just says everybody needs to be in the same pool when it comes to protecting American investors. So we've introduced legislation to that effect. We also wrote to Ambassador Lighthizer, asking him to include this as part of the negotiations with China.
Senator, I understand why the administration is using tariffs with China. I understand why we feel we're at the unequal end of an unfair playing field when it comes to that. I get why there are concerns about Huawei and security. I think Huawei basically lied and stole IP to get where it is today. But when I hear something like this, I can't help but think there's a little bit of jingoism attached. I mean, Enron and WorldCom were U.S. companies. Why do you think Chinese companies are so much worse than what we've seen here?
Well, because they're the only outliers here. They're the only country that is not playing by the rules. We have a system, an entity that was created after Sarbanes-Oxley. It's called the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. And what they do is just look at the accounting records of companies that are listed on the exchange to make sure that they're compliant. Look, back in 2011, you had a number of Chinese companies essentially go under, and it turned out they were defrauding U.S. investors. This would have protected those U.S. investors. There was estimated $40 billion that were lost to investors. So this isn't jingoism. This is just asking China to do what every other country is already doing.
Don't the exchanges already have the authority to have oversight of these companies? I mean, I was of the impression that if you can actually pass the exchange's own strict standards, that you're in a much better position than a company that's listing on a Chinese stock exchange.
No, but this is the loophole in the law right now. Is the reason we established this oversight board was to ensure the integrity of these exchanges. And so it is not the case that China is currently complying with that review. Every other country has come into compliance. The one that was still outstanding was Belgium. They've now negotiated an agreement. So, I guess the question is, why would we want to expose U.S. investors to the possibility of being defrauded by one country? This is something that I think we've been pushing for a while. We've given 3 or 4 years already to allow these countries to come into compliance. Our legislation actually would give another 3 years for Chinese companies and other companies to come into compliance. We think that's a reasonable amount of time, and we think it's important to protect the integrity of our exchanges so investors have confidence.
This is bipartisan, I take it. What kind of support do you have in the Senate right now?
We have very strong support in the Senate. As you said, Senator Kennedy and I have introduced this legislation, and my view is if we had a vote on this today, it would pass overwhelmingly, maybe unanimously.
Have you heard back from Trade Representative Lighthizer?
We've not. We just wrote to Ambassador Lighthizer. We introduced the legislation some time ago. We did bring it to the attention of the administration. I think their view is that Chinese companies should come into compliance. We just want to make sure that we elevate this so that it's part of the conversations when Ambassador Lighthizer and our negotiating team are meeting with Chinese, whether it's in the upcoming G20 arena or whenever we conclude an agreement, if we conclude an agreement.